Dr. Mark Billinghurst, a legend in our eyes, and when I first started Augmented Reality, he was the go-to man to say, hey, how do we start and what can we do? And over the ensuing years, we've found Mark to be just incredible for our industry, passing on great advice, having time for people, and obviously also doing astounding work. To tell you all about it, please welcome to the stage Dr. Mark Billinghurst. Just in case.
Excellent. Can you all hear me okay? Well, maybe not. Let me just use this. Here we go. Great. Well, it's really a great privilege to be here. I've been wanting to come to one of these AR meetups in Sydney for a while now, so Scott's been harassing me, and finally I'm here, which is great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about virtual reality and then augmented reality at the same time. So we all know that augmented reality is really hot right now. You can see people head-mount displays, you see it on TV and magazines. Well, actually, though, all these images were taken from 1995. So it was hot 20 years ago, and 20 years ago was about when I entered the HIT lab at the University of Washington. This is a picture of one of our staff using an old VR system. This is our silicon graphics machine. It cost $250,000, and it generated 1,500 polygons a second. And our head-mount displays were quite low resolution. So at that time, I was really excited about VR, and I knew it was going to be a big hit. I just knew that when the head-mount displays got cheaper, when computers could generate millions of polygons, when the tracking was inexpensive, and when you had really good 3D input devices, it was going to be a huge, huge hit. And shortly after I got to the HIT lab, the head-mount displays did get cheaper. This was the virtual I/O display you could buy for $600. The CyberMax was about $800, and the Virtual Boy from Nintendo. So let me ask a question. If you could have a wide field of view display that was $100 or less, how many of you would be interested in buying that? Like it was a 100-degree field of view display. Great. Now keep your hands up. What happens if it looked like this? So in 1996, VR had a big problem, and the problem was this. It was the social problem. So there were comics like this that came out. You know, here's a virtual reality spreadsheet, and he's trying to trapped in. And so you all know that shortly after, in the late 90s, we had this VR winter, and Computer World a few years ago said that virtual reality was voted 7th on the list of the 21 biggest technology flops in 2007. Microsoft Bob was number 1 on that list. So what do we learn from that? Well, first of all, it's important not to believe your own hype. You know, there was a lot of people very excited about VR 20 years ago, and they got carried up with their own message and their own hype. But the second thing that they forgot about was the importance of human-centered design, or designing for real users. You know, the technology was okay, but when you put the gear on it made it look ridiculous, and you couldn't really use it very well, and you couldn't see very well. In fact, using a VR headset in those days was equivalent of being legally blind. So, you know, that didn't meet many users' needs. There's also an important need to move from demo to production and to try and target the profitable niche markets first. And finally, most importantly, is to follow the money. You know, a lot of what we were doing 20 years ago wasn't areas that were going to be profitable in any way. So now, 20 years later, it's hot again, and you see the same thing. You know, there's some books, people wearing headsets, cover of Time magazine. But what I'm going to talk about today is how 2016 isn't going to be like 1996, and for a number of reasons. So first of all, it's not just VR anymore. There's a lot of investment coming into the area. There's a lot of inexpensive hardware platforms. There's very easy-to-use content creation tools. There's new devices you can use, and some proven use cases. And most importantly, people now, just like Amber showed to a great example with her Arboretum project, people now are really putting the user first and designing for the user experience rather than being technology-driven. So let me talk through some of those areas. My background is computer interface design, and for a long time in the area of computer interface design, the holy grail is to build invisible interfaces. We want to get the computer out of the picture and let people interact with the world around them using the skills you already have. So there's a number of ways to do that. One is virtual reality. So in this slide here, the C is the computer-generated environment and the R is the real world. So with virtual reality, you put your head-mount display on. Of course, the real world's gone away, the computer's gone away, and you're immersed in this 3D environment. But there are other ways to do that. You know, ubiquitous computing, where you embed the technology and the environment around you, or augmented reality, where you're interacting with the real world through the screen. So it turns out that it's not just VR right now. What's happening is that all these 3 examples of interfaces can be arranged on this mixed reality continuum that Scott talked about a little while ago. And the whole area of mixed reality is growing right now. So we've all seen examples of ubiquitous computing or Internet of Things, which is a really hot topic right now. You know, smart home sensor networks, for example. Augmented reality we know about, virtual reality. So here's the Gartner hype cycle, which predicts how long it's going to take technology to get into the mainstream acceptance, or this so-called plateau of productivity. And what you want to do is you want to get your technology from here to here as quick as possible, and this is where you're going to start making the money. So each of these technologies are color-coded depending on how long it takes to get there. And if you look on this, you can see here's virtual reality. They say it's about 5 years away from being commercialized or productized, but it's actually probably a little bit overestimate. Augmented reality is coming down this trough of disillusionment, and Internet of Things or ubiquitous computing is up here. So you've got these three areas now that are driving very strongly towards this plateau of productivity, and they all can benefit from each other. You know, with the Internet of Things, you get very cheap sensors that you can now use in AR and VR systems. With VR driving, high-quality mobile content generation that also benefits AR and so forth. Also, there's been huge amounts of investment. This is a chart of what investment's been done in the AR and VR space in the last 2.5 years. There's been more than $1 billion of investment in the States alone and from VCs, and over 120 deals completed. So this is a much, much larger amount of investment that was ever done before 20 years ago. And it's increasing. You can see 22 deals done the first quarter of this year, 600 million done at the end of last year. So because of that, you've got a very large growing landscape. Here's some VR companies across very many different sectors or areas of the platform. So some people are building platforms, some are building devices and controllers and so forth. And here's the AR landscape, also many, many different companies. Another driving thing is the growth of inexpensive hardware. So now, of course, we all have smartphones in our pockets. So now we've got an AR device in our pocket. And there's 1.4 billion smartphones sold next year. So that's a huge market to address. Of course, you take this and then you wrap it around a piece of cardboard, and now you've got a VR device. And these are essentially free. We went to China and bought some. Here's our, I think this cost us $2.50. So now you've got a free, essentially free piece of VR hardware. And a number of companies are giving these away, as giveaways for their marketing. And of course, with so it's the mobile VR with platforms like Qualcomm's Vuforia platform, it becomes very, very easy to build a handheld AR experience for your mobile phone or your tablet. There's more than 100,000 developers and 20,000 apps in the App Store right now. It's also become much easier than ever before to create AR and VR content. You've got some companies like 360 Heroes that let you build clusters of GoPro cameras and capture 360 photo bubbles or videos very easily. There's software like, we've got some software we developed called Build AR, which is essentially a drag and drop AR development tool. And Craft AR from Kachuma is basically similar, which you see over here. You can just drag and drop icons onto a marker you track off. And then you've got really great support from game engines like Unity that lets you, again, build AR and VR experiences very, very easily. Very high-quality experiences. The other exciting trend which is happening is the large number of new devices for input and output you're getting that lets you deliver new experiences. So there's a number of new displays technologies that are being developed. One is Waveguide Displays. So I've got one here. This is from Loomis. If you can see, it looks like it's a little bit bulky, but it looks like a pair of see-through glasses. This is 3 millimeters thick, and it provides a 35-degree field of view AR experience in a see-through platform. And similarly, you've got companies like Magic Leap that are developing retinal display-based AR experiences, contact lenses, and projected AR. And then you've got new input technology. This is my Google Tango tablet, and this basically has a Microsoft Kinect depth sensor in the back of it, or something equivalent, and so now the tablet knows where it is in space, and as I walk through the real world, it will allow me to track myself in space, and it turns any real space into an AR or VR environment. And Google and the Tango Group now are working with Qualcomm to embed this into mobile phones, so early next year you'll see mobile phones that have this also position sensing capability, and also content capture capability. I can take this and scan objects and build 3D models. There's a number of proven use cases, and you've seen some great examples already. I'll just touch on two that are probably a little bit less traditional. So one is this Quiver Vision software, which came out of the HIT Lab a couple of years ago and now spun into its own company. This is an AR colouring book application. You can colour pages and they pop up to life. You can try it for yourself over at David Francis' booth next door. But one of the interesting things that came out of this was that teachers used this and they discovered that when people were colouring the colouring book pages, the children would also want to write stories about what was on the pages. And they found that when they had them writing stories using the AR app, they would write stories that were about 3 times as long as stories that they wrote without the AR app, and also linguistically much more complicated, because they saw these virtual characters come to life and they now wanted to tell stories about the characters. This app has about 2 million downloads, so it's very, very successful, and it's free to try next door. Another example, more in the VR space, is a project that grew out of a project that I worked on when I was at the HIT Lab at the University of Washington, and this was using virtual reality for pain relief. So it turns out if you're a burn victim, you put a VR headset on and you immerse yourself in a virtual reality snow world, then you can drop your level of pain that you're feeling significantly, and in many cases the pain goes away. There's a company now, First Hand Technologies, that has brought this to market and have a long history of building VR pain-related experiences. One of the most important things, though, is to focus on the user experience, and we've already had a great example of that from Amber about how they looked at the user needs in terms of the Arboretum. So it's really about understanding what user needs, designing for those needs, and doing rapid prototyping and then testing your design. So let me give you an example about how not to do that. So there's a company called TAT a while ago that was doing really amazing mobile interface concept designs. And in fact, they got bought by BlackBerry about 4 years ago. But one of their concepts was, though, this augmented ID. So the idea was you'd go to a meeting, a person's giving a presentation, and wouldn't it be great if you could take your phone, hold it up, and capture the person's face, and then around their face you'd see all their social network stuff. So there's your Facebook, and Twitter feed, links, and LinkedIn, and so forth. And then you could just tap on those, and you'd see the person's details on your phone. So you'd never forget the person, you'd have all the contacts right away. That sounds really great. But then think about it in actual use. So you're going to a business meeting, a bunch of strangers, you sit down, I introduce myself, and then I get my phone out and start doing this around the room. How's that going to make people feel? One person said it might make them feel like they'll be stopped by the police for ID or security scan, or showing your papers. And somebody else said anybody pointing a device in my direction to try to identify me, be prepared for either a lawsuit or a punch in the face. So technically it's possible, and they built it working. This is working. So it's, from a technical perspective, really great. But from a social perspective, maybe not. So it's really important to think about the social and use case implications. What makes a good mixed reality experience? Well, first of all, you have to have something compelling. You have to have an engaging magic moment that really grabs people's attentions. Second, it needs to be really intuitive and easy to use. So ideally uses people's existing skills, and also anchors in the physical world, because it's it's supposed to be a mixed reality experience. So one example of that is what David's showing next door, the Quiver Vision, or what used to be Colour AR. I don't have time to show the live demo, but I encourage you to go next door and try it. It's really magical to be able to take a piece of colouring book paper, colour it in, and then see your own creations come to life with your own colours in it. And this is what drove Quiver Vision to get more than 2 million downloads in just about a year and a half. So it's a really fantastic example of a good mixed reality experience. So let me just finish up by speaking for a couple of minutes on how to build the business. So the AR business today is about $600 million, and about 80% of that business is in games and marketing applications. So the projections that Scott already talked about are huge. They're saying that by 2020 it's going to be a $150 billion industry, which is huge considering that the whole game market last year was $80 billion. So how are we going to get from here to there? Well, there's a number of things. First of all, you want to try and drive all those technologies over to this right-hand side here. And the way to do that is to enter new markets and to look at new applications. So, for example, there are a couple of companies developing really interesting commercial AR systems for training. So Ngrain, for example, lets you take a real model of a engine part and look at it through a tablet and see step by step how to disassemble the engine. In our lab, we're looking at how we can use AR for new types of social and shared experiences. So we've looked at how you can use Google Glass to capture a panorama of your surroundings and then use it and share that with a remote person on a tablet. Then the remote person on the tablet can then annotate and share the annotations back with you. So it gives the remote person the feeling that they're there and they can share the experience with you. A little bit more ambitious version of this, a similar thing, is to look at augmented reality remote collaboration where you've got content capture. So a year or so ago, we developed an application where you could scan the real world using Microsoft Connect and capture a 3D model of your surroundings and then share that with a remote person. The remote person then can take AR objects and place them in your real world and help you do real world tasks. So with it, Google Tango, you could easily do that now without having to have complicated, expensive hardware. However, there's still research needed in many areas, social acceptance, cloud services, and so forth. The social acceptance is really important. A study done recently showed that only 12% of 4,500 adults will be willing to wear AR glasses. And even with handheld AR, 20% of people said that they had trouble when they used it. You know, when I'm walking around town holding my phone up like this, people think I'm taking photographs of them, and that might cause me some problems. It turns out, though, when you go back to the mixed reality continuum, there's really interesting research being done at the boundaries of these two areas. So looking at what happens when you can combine virtual and augmented reality together, or AR and ubiquitous computing. I don't have time to go through all of this, but just to give you one example, if you could take AR and ubiquitous computing and combine those together, what type of interesting applications could you build? And one is this one here. It's an application, it's just chopped off the bottom. It's called Architecture of Radio, and it lets you visualize Wi-Fi signals in the real world around you. So as you walk around in your environment, you can see the signals coming and signal strength coming, and it plays them back using audio feedback. So you can hear the Wi-Fi around you. So just to wrap up, so I believe that 2016 won't be like 1996, mostly because there's a focus on more than just AR. You've got more than just VR. You've got AR, VR, and the Internet of Things, or ubiquitous computing. Very low barrier to entry, and most importantly, an emphasis now on user experience. We're getting more storytellers into the field that help us build better user experiences. And to build the business, we need to move into new markets. We've done really great with gaming and marketing and advertising, but now if we want to grow their business 10 times larger or 30 times larger than it is now, we've got to expand the AR experiences into markets like training or social networking or collaboration. And there's also important areas research to be done, especially in the areas of social acceptance, so you don't have the same mistakes as 20 years ago. So thank you very much for your time. If you want to contact me, here's all my contact details. I'll also make these slides available on slideshare.net. So just look for my name on SlideShare, and you'll be able to get all the slides for yourself. So thank you very much.